the tension is just continually rising during this whole time. Everybody was on edge. Everybody was like, oh my God, what's going to happen next?
Subject to United States defense measures.
Inbound air contact, closing and descending 1,000 feet per mile. Range 13 miles.
Oh my God, it's getting closer. It's getting closer. What's the captain going to do? What's going to happen? You know, what are they going to do?
Iran Air 655 now signs off with Bandar Abbas Air Traffic Control.
8.4. Have a nice flight.
Thank you. Good day.
God damn it, he's getting close.
Mark, incoming Boghammer, bearing 042.
Air contact still inbound, increasing speed and descending, range 11 miles.
Time is a demon here. At some point in time, you have to make the decision. When the aircraft reached a little over 10 miles, at that point in time, I either make the decision then or I don't make it at all because I reached minimum weapons range.
It's the moment of truth. Captain Rogers turns his fire authorization key.
Take order, track 4131.
Do I have a take order on the contact?
Yes, take.
Birds away. Rails clear.
Iranian aircraft on course 209, speed 353 knots.
As the final warning goes out on the military air distress frequency, Rogers keeps his finger on the hold fire button so he can destroy the missiles if the aircraft finally responds.
Estimate 10 seconds to intercept.
The strange ambience is a strange feeling. Between the time you take off and you reach 10,000 feet, you know that you are in danger.
Gear up. Gear up. No lights.
Meanwhile, the terrorist leader, Abu Abdallah, appears to have chosen his spot.
He asked us to park our cars pointing outwards so that everybody could leave in a different direction. That's when I should have realized that the bluffing was over.
The journalists are now very alarmed. They cannot leave. They're trapped.
بص شايفه اهو في طريقه شايفه اتصدق يا راجل اتصدق اضرب يلا اضرب يا راجل يلا اضرب اعمل حاجه شايفه اضرب يا سيدي اضرب
This is video shot by the terrorists themselves. They'll deliver it to the media in Baghdad the next day.
Green and yellow.
We had 3 hydraulic systems. They are identified by color. which one is the green and yellow and blue.
Big jets depend on hydraulic power. Hydraulic fluid runs inside pipes throughout the aircraft. When the pilots move the control column, pistons push the fluid in the pipes to climb, descend, or turn the plane. With no hydraulics, pilots have no way to control their flight. The missile has exploded in the wing, where the pipes filled with hydraulic fluid are now draining. It's like driving a car at speed and suddenly losing the steering wheel. Suddenly, the nose pitches up. The increased G-force makes it difficult for Piskarev to reach the controls. He does his best, but nothing happens. Piskarev's hard turn to the left has had no effect on the plane.
Hold it. Hold the control column.
Eldar is the only one with both hands fully on the controls. He can only follow the most basic orders. He can't get up because the speed of the turn is pushing him back in his seat.
To the left. To the left. To the left now. To the right. The other way. I am trying to get left. Okay, get out.
Eldar has been in the pilot's seat for just over 4 minutes. And now he can't leave. His body feels twice its normal weight.
Get out! Get out!
Kudrinsky can do nothing but struggle against the crippling G-forces.
Get out! Get out!
Russian International Airlines Flight 593 to Hong Kong is in serious trouble.
There's the ground!
The pilot's 15-year-old son has been at the controls for 4 minutes. The plane is turning steeply and losing altitude.
The other way!
Captain Kudrinsky desperately needs to get back into the pilot's seat, but he can barely move. The plane is turning so steeply and so quickly, the G-forces on his body make it feel like it's twice its normal weight. Everyone on board now feels the force of the plane's dramatic movements. His plane is in a serious crisis, but Captain Danilov can't get to the cockpit. He too is squashed by the powerful forces created by the plane's extreme bank. The plane still isn't responding. To add to their confusion, an alarm begins to sound. It signals the complete shutdown of the autopilot. The plane is now completely in the hands of Piskarev and Eldar. And to make matters even worse, there's another alarm.
The other way! The other
The plane is about to stall.
To the left! Now!
An automatic safety system kicks in to keep the plane flying. It lowers the nose and puts the Airbus into a steep dive to regain speed.
Left, there's the ground!
The plane dives at a frightening 40,000 feet per minute. They'd been flying at 10,000 meters, but now they're falling fast. Unless they do something quickly, they will hit the ground in less than a minute. Piskarev pulls back on the control column as hard as he can to bring the Airbus out of the dive. The nose finally comes up, and the aircraft begins climbing quickly. Meanwhile, First Officer Piskarev is still trying to gain control of the aircraft.
Just leave us too slow!
Piskarev has pulled the aircraft out of the dive, but it's climbing too quickly. The engines on the A310 don't have enough power to push it almost vertically into the sky. The airspeed drops dramatically. The plane strains to climb, but it's been pushed too far. As the force of the acceleration eases, Kudrinsky leaps into action. But Piskarev has stalled the plane. The nose drops into a corkscrew dive. Now the Airbus is twisting towards the ground from 6,000 meters at a breathtaking 70 meters a second.
Full throttle!
For the first time since the crisis began, captain and co-pilot can work together to save the plane.
Full throttle, no? I got it, I have full throttle! Got it!
Kudrinsky pumps the rudder, the vertical surface on the tail, to help break out of the spin.
What's the speed? I don't see it.
At last, the plane seems to be responding. Working the rudder, Kudrinsky has nearly stopped the corkscrew dive.
Coming out! Coming out! Too much speed, ease back on throttle a bit.
After a desperate struggle, the two pilots have managed to pull the plane out of its terrifying spin. They're starting to level out, but still not completely in control.
We'll get out of this. Everything is fine. Easy. Pull backwards a little bit.
In all the chaos of the past few minutes, the pilots don't know exactly how far they've fallen. Suddenly, they run out of time. Flight 296 makes a gentle turn to line up with the runway. The pilots must now lose more altitude and speed to get into position for the flyover.
200. Mesdames et messieurs, votre attention s'il vous plaît. L'Airbus A320 arrive.
Okay, you're at 100 feet there.
100.
Watch it.
100.
Watch it.
The aircraft is now at the planned altitude. For Asseline, this will be the most delicate part of the maneuver. He must keep the plane in a stable position with the nose up, but not too high.
I looked at the ground and said, look, he's not high enough, because you could see the grass right out your window.
Okay, I'm okay there. Disconnect auto throttle.
He disables one of the plane's safety features so that the computer won't speed up the slow-moving plane. Only now, Captain Asseline sees a danger that threatens the lives of everyone on board. The A320's low-speed flyover at the Habsheim airfield is suddenly not going according to plan. There's a forest in the path of Captain Asseline's plane.
30.
Take off, go run power.
He selects the highest thrust setting and pulls back on the controls, expecting the aircraft to pull up. But the plane keeps dropping.
Can be.
J'ai commencé à voir par le hublot des branches d'arbres. I started to see through the window tree branches. I was astonished. You can imagine being on a trail in a large vehicle, a bumpy trail, driving at 80 or 100 kilometers an hour, and you're shaking from all sides. It was like that. I was saying to myself, the plane has to stay in one piece, because if the plane stays whole, we'll be okay. If it breaks up, we're done for.
S'il casse, c'est fichu.
Still full of fuel, the right wing of the jet is sheared off. The fuel ignites immediately on impact.
Turn left, steer 90. 090 degrees, Delta Alpha.
The controller talks Flight 148 through the last turn to align the plane with the runway, now 25 kilometers away. Then, First Officer Cherubin notices the plane is slightly off course.
We're headed inside. You're inside there. You should have started with 070.
Yeah.
At least that much.
The controller also notices that the plane is off course.
Delta Alpha.
It has missed aligning itself with Andlo, the runway's electronic guidepost.
Delta Alpha, you're passing to the right of Andlo.
Nevertheless, he authorizes the landing.
Authorized for final approach 05.
Delta Alpha.
The captain initiates the landing sequence.
Flaps towards 2.
Flaps towards 2. Flaps at 2.
Gear down.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to land in a few minutes.
Heke notices that the plane is traveling too fast, so he extends the speed brakes. They disrupt airflow over the wing, which helps create more drag to slow the plane.
We have to watch our descent.
The approach axis.
The first officer is more concerned with their horizontal position in relation to the runway.
It was 60. Check it out.
But before the crew can adjust their course,
generators fall off the line, a considerable amount of power is lost, electrical power is lost. In the cabin, the screams, the crying, and then this terrible sound of the wind against the fuselage as the plane drops from the sky.
in the cockpit, the simple turn over the Red Sea is taking a bizarre twist.
See what the aircraft just did?
Captain Kader doesn't like the way his plane is behaving.
Turning right, sir.
What?
Aircraft is turning right.
Turning right? How turning right?
The plane is supposed to be turning left on its way to Cairo. Instead, it's turning in the opposite direction.
Okay. Well,
the captain tries to get his plane back on course, but his situation just gets worse.
Overbank.
Knowing he's in trouble, the captain tells the first officer to engage the autopilot.
Autopilot! Autopilot!
But it doesn't work.
No autopilot, Commander!
The 737 is now flying almost completely on its side. The plane gains speed as it spirals towards the Red Sea. Just minutes after takeoff, the plane is out of control. Diving towards the water, it's traveling at more than 700 kilometers an hour. Everyone on board is running out of time. A passenger jet filled with French families is plunging towards the Red Sea. After flying almost upside down, the crew is finally beginning to bring their plane under control. Then they hear the ground proximity warning. They're getting dangerously close to the Red Sea. In heavy wind and blinding rain, the crew of a passenger jet struggles to land.
Put it down! Put it down!
A terrifying crash landing leads to a desperate fight to survive. High above the Pacific Ocean, an extraordinary drama is unfolding. An explosion at 7,300 meters aboard a Boeing 737 bound for the Hawaiian island of Oahu tears 35 square meters of fuselage from the airplane, exposing passengers to the sky. The cabin is depressurized with no emergency oxygen supply. Unless they rapidly reach a lower altitude where they can breathe again, the passengers will die. Captain Bob Schornsteimer takes over command of the aircraft from First Officer Mimi Tompkins. He begins an emergency descent, dropping 1,200 meters per minute, its speed now increasing to more than 500 kilometers an hour. As the aircraft hurtles down, passengers face a new terror. Wreckage blocks their view of the cockpit, and when the airplane split apart, the nose dropped down by around 1 meter. The plane is held together by just the narrow floor beams.
Looks real good. You're coming out of 500.
US Air 737 has barely touched down. It erupts in flames and crashes through Los Angeles International Airport.
I saw US Air touch down, and as he got about third way down the runway at taxiway 45, the aircraft was fully engulfed in flames. The supervisor ran past me to pick up the crash phone and alert the emergency vehicles to respond.
Aboard the flight, sheer terror.
There was a tremendous crunching sensation, and there was this extraordinary shower of sparks that shot by my window.
Then, without warning, the 737 starts to spin and roll.
Oh, God. 15 flaps. 15. Going up. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
A.J. Davis flies blind through heavy rain and cloud cover. He expects to see the airport any second.
Pull up! Pull up!
Most of the victims, they probably still had heartbeats when the airplane crashed, but almost certainly were in an irreversible coma.
Hypoxia is no more painful than falling asleep. But for Andreas Prodromou, the flight must have been a nightmare. As the F-16s roared to meet the jet, and with his oxygen running out, he must have known that he too was almost out of time. Yet to the very end, he didn't give up. Prodromou made one last attempt to save the plane. When he returns to the cockpit, the young flight attendant who dreamed of becoming a pilot calls for help. But no one can hear him, probably because the radio was still tuned to Larnaca, the airport on Cyprus where the flight had taken off. Fighting hypoxia and struggling to control an airplane larger than any he had ever flown, Prodromou was in an impossible situation. Even if he could have landed the plane, it was now too late. Flight 522 was out of time and fuel. Backfires occur when the engine isn't burning cleanly.
The engine's on fire!
There's too much fuel and not enough oxygen.
Engine failure, number 4. Fire action, number 4. Checklist powering gear.
On Flight 9, the backfires were the cause of the enormous jets of flame many passengers saw behind the engines. After struggling against the choking effects of the ash cloud, the engines on board the 747 flamed out.
Go around! Perhaps!
I had no doubts this was still just a normal landing, and the aircraft went on and was decelerating quicker than normal, but nothing to really alarm me. things were getting pretty serious then. The aircraft was starting to break apart. I forced myself up to look, and there was just bottles, bags, everything you can imagine was coming out. Only way I can really describe it is like about 1,000 737s landing all at once.
On a wooded hillside in Guam, the shattered plane finally grinds to a halt.
Approach target and destroy.
Roger, locked on already. Executed launch.
Airspeed 220. We're banking right, Captain. I'm disengaging autopilot.
For the first time, Captain Ho takes manual control of the plane. He struggles with the controls, but the plane has veered into thick cloud, and he can't see the horizon as he tries to keep his jet level.
I've lost ADI. The ADIs have malfunctioned. It's going out of limits.
Just minutes after their fourth engine stopped working, the China Airlines flight suddenly stalls and begins falling from the sky.
They say we're 25 miles west of Kumagaya.
Suddenly, the plane goes into a steep dive, the worst yet.
Stop the flap! Power! Flap up! Flap up! Flap up! Power! Power!
The plane is falling at 5,500 meters a minute.
Raise the nose! Flap up! Flap up! Flap up! Hit up! Raise the nose! Raise the nose! Raise the nose! Easy does it! Easy does it!
I could feel that we were just violently just going up. And I felt like I was in a roller coaster ride or something.
Terrain. Easy does it! Easy does it! Oh, baby!
Instinctively, I reached over and I grabbed my father's hand and I put my head in my lap. In my mind, I just kept on thinking, come on, just straighten it out, straighten it out.
Oh, baby! More! Up!
These were the last words on the cockpit voice recorder.
Stand by to verify speed. The 707 is about to take off. It is on taxi.
Confirm our speed.
It is very important we do not have any speed indications on board.
How can we be flying at this speed if we're descending with engines on idle?
Give me the altitude, please.
Yes, you are maintaining 9,700 according to the scope, sir.
9,700?
Yes, correct.
What is your indicated altitude? Do you have any visual reference?
9,700, but it is indicating too low terrain. Are you sure you have us on the radar at 50 miles?
Hey, look, with 370,
we have 370 what? Do we lower gear?
Aero Peru 603, Lima.
What do we do with the gear?
Suddenly, they realize the awful truth.
We're heading water! Pull it up!
Climb Aero Peru 603 if you need to pull up.
For 20 seconds, the pilots struggle for altitude.
On the beach, tourists are stunned. The horror of the crash is captured on one of their video cameras. The plane is flying at more than 370 kilometers per hour when it hits the water.
First bump, fairly gentle, and I sort of breathed a sigh of relief. Wow.
As soon as we touched the water, it was quite violent.
Then the second bump was like a 30-mile-an-hour auto accident.
I had a feeling the plane was not going to hold.
The third bump, and I said, uh-oh, I'm dead. And I blacked out.
Oh my God!
Oh no!
Warning signals indicate the dive is exceeding the maximum speed allowed for the plane, taking them to 99% of the speed of sound. This far past the plane's design limits, the stresses on the airframe are pulling it apart.
What's happening?
Captain El Habashi pulls back hard on his control column. Then he tries to use the engines to power their way out of the dive by pushing forward on the throttles, but he gets nothing.
What? Who shut off the engines?
Desperate, the captain deploys the speed brakes, panels standing up from the wings in an effort to slow the dive. The dive is slowing, back from the brink of the sound barrier. The dive goes on, but the nose is coming up. In just seconds, they go from 0G to double the force of gravity. Captain El Habashi struggles to level the plane and pulls back hard on the control column. The 767's dive begins to slow.
Move with me!
In seconds, the engines stop and the power goes off, plunging the aircraft into darkness. Here, the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder stop. No one knows what happened in the plane during the next 2 minutes, but radar tracks its path. The plane is climbing again. Up from about 5,000 meters to over 7,500 meters as the aircraft structure is weakened by the stresses of abnormal speeds and maneuvers. Then the aircraft falls into another terrifying dive. Stressed beyond endurance, the left engine is ripped from the plane.
Hey, no smoking and seatbelts.
On.
Instruments.
Syncs. Cross-check.
Captain Morwood uses the power of engine number 2, already running, to fire engine number 1. Morwood and Mills are both highly experienced pilots. However, they've each flown fewer than 100 hours in the Fokker F-28. The multi-million-dollar aircraft is the first Air Ontario jet to serve the remote Northern Ontario region. 24 minutes after landing in Dryden, Flight 1363 is ready to leave.
Inform Kenora, we're rolling.
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting airways to Winnipeg.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
An approaching aircraft's urgent request to land
Unbelievable.
gives Captain Morwood little choice. He delays takeoff.
Okay, 363's holding short of the active.
We are going to be a few moments until a small plane lands safely. We're sorry, folks. This just isn't our day.
In the 2 years that I had flown with Air Ontario, I'd never come across anything like this before.
The Cessna 150 lands safely, clearing the runway for Flight 1363's departure.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time, 363 Dryden.
Finally, an hour behind schedule, the plane taxis to runway 29.
As we're going down the runway to position for takeoff, The blanket of snow was falling and I couldn't see the tree line anymore. It was like looking through a sheer.
Folks, we're sorry for the delay. Flight attendants, please be seated for takeoff.
At 12:09 p.m., Flight 1363 is ready for takeoff.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora Dryden, Ontario 363 is about to roll 29 at Dryden.
Ontario 363, Kenora, roger.
Captain Morwood performs a brief engine run-up, heating the engines to rid them of any accumulated snow and ice. Then he begins his roll down the runway.
When we're taking off, I'm usually very quiet and focused, meticulously going through a checklist in my own mind. What would I do in the case of an emergency?
E1.
The F-28 reaches its takeoff speed.
Rotate.
80 knots.
Our takeoff was very slow and sluggish, like a slow, sluggish person running up a hill.
Clearly there's something wrong. The F-28 struggles to get airborne.
We cleared the trees. The plane started shaking.
I thought, oh my God, we're gonna crash.
That's when all hell broke loose. If you can equate to being in a Mixmaster, that's what the plane felt like at the time.
There's this dip to the left and then dip to the right. The pilot's trying to get this plane up.
Then all of a sudden there was a power burst. The plane seemed to stabilize itself.
You could feel that the pilot's trying to get control of it.
But a few seconds later, it became a Mixmaster again.
I yelled out, emergency, grab your ankles, get your heads down.
Grab your ankles, get your heads down!
And I kept yelling that, and then I assumed my brace position. You could hear people screaming and yelling. There's loud, horrible sounds. We are clearly crashing.
The pilots are helpless. 49 seconds after lifting off, Air Ontario Flight 1363 crash lands in the bush, 950 meters west of runway 29.
Passengers settled in?
We're all set.
Good afternoon, folks.
We'd like to welcome you aboard Chalk's Ocean Airways Flight 101 to Bimini. Our travel time to Bimini will be 25 minutes.
Hope you enjoy the flight. Let's have the startup checklist, please.
Roger.
Michelle Marks is in command of today's flight. She was promoted to captain earlier this year. First Officer Paul DeSanctis joined the airline 8 months ago.
Starter on.
Starter on.
This is his first flight with Captain Marks.
All clear to taxi?
All clear.
The Grumman Mallard is a twin turboprop design. It has a V-shaped hull and underwing pontoons. It's designed to carry up to 17 passengers. The plane has retractable landing gear, so it can operate on either land or sea.
Gear coming up.
Takeoff in the Mallard, depending on the days, it could be a lot of fun or it could be a real challenge.
Weight and balance check. We're good.
The Miami seaplane base has no control tower. The crew has to keep a lookout for boat traffic as they taxi through one of the busiest ports in the world.
Taking off out of Miami in the shipping channel, it's kind of like trying to take off during rush hour traffic. You've got boat traffic, wave traffic, the wind, the airplane to deal with, and everybody's going different speeds, and you're trying to get up and go and navigate around everybody, so it's always a handful.
Flight 101 will take off from X-44, a seaplane base near a channel known as Government Cut.
Prepare for takeoff.
Roger. Ready to take off.
Both pilots have their hand on the throttles. It's to prevent the captain from inadvertently pulling back if the plane hits a wave.
45 knots. 50 knots.
This is the moment most passengers are paying for, the takeoff. Half speedboat, half plane. It's a unique thrill.
75 knots. 80 knots.
For the pilots, accelerating through the waves is often the most difficult part of the flight.
The airplane itself was really hard to fly as far as on the water, getting onto the step, which is what we call getting on plane. And in rough sea conditions and in rough wave conditions, it could be a real challenge.
But this takeoff goes smoothly. Flight 101 is no longer a boat, it's now a plane en route to Bimini. It's 2:38 in the afternoon. The plane's flight path takes it past South Beach, where sunbathers and surfers are out in force. Just less than a minute into the flight, the Grumman Mallard is climbing through 500 feet, well below the clouds. Then, the plane rolls violently and dives. The pilots barely have time to register what's happening. Their struggles are in vain. By chance, a tourist from New York catches Flight 101's final moments on his camera. 60 seconds after takeoff, the plane slams into the ocean. Robin Thecke, too preoccupied by the safety of her passengers, looks out of a window and suddenly sees the tops of the trees. She has but a few seconds left to strap herself in her jump seat before impact.
Brace positions! Keep your heads down, everyone! Hold on, this is gonna be rough!
The airport is only 6 kilometers away, but too far for the crippled plane. The pilots have to attempt a crash landing in a field.
Help me hold it! Help me hold it, help me hold it!
Here, 500. Here, 500.
The plane's altitude voice alarm sounds, warning the pilots that they're flying too close to the ground without their landing gear lowered. The pilots will attempt to land on the plane's belly.
100.
Help me! Help me! Help me hold it! Help me hold it!
Here, 100.
Amy, I love you!
These are the last words on the cockpit voice recorder. The plane is flying at 220 kilometers per hour and only seconds away from impact.
50. Here, 40. Here, 30. Here, 20. Here.
As the crew of Aeromexico Flight 498 continue to close in on the airport,
Landing lights.
their DC-9 is rocked by a violent shudder.
Bugs, altimeter bugs.
What was that?
Aeromexico 498, Los Angeles approach.
First Officer Valencia tries desperately to control their dive.
Aeromexico 498,
Los Angeles approach.
This can't be.
A microburst is a violent shaft of air falling from a storm cloud. Back in 1985, few people knew more about encounters between microbursts and airplanes than John McCarthy.
If you're at the kitchen sink and you turn on the water and it goes straight down and it splashes out in all directions. And that's kind of what a microburst is, except that it is extremely bad news if you're an airplane flying through it at low altitude.
A plane first faces a strong headwind which lifts the plane skyward, then a downdraft which slams it towards the ground. Finally, the microburst delivers its most dangerous punch, the tailwind.
And you would get a rapid descent, a loss of lift, and a rapid descent towards the ground, and easily crash the airplane.
I'm just flying and nothing else.
30 seconds after declaring emergency, the pilots of Swissair 111 face an inferno.
All my screens are down. I'm flying on standby instruments, maintaining 300.
Swissair 111, you are cleared to commence your fuel dump on that track, and advise me when your dump is complete. Swissair 111, check. You are cleared to start the fuel dump.
There is no further communication from the aircraft. Six minutes later, residents of Peggy's Cove hear a deafening explosion.
Blacker than hell out there.
Where's Charlie at?
By the time they get to the new runway, they're 45 minutes behind schedule.
Northwest 255, runway 3 center, clear for takeoff.
Within 17 seconds, 65,000 kilograms of passengers and aircraft hurtle down runway 3C. But moments before liftoff, Mouse discovers he can't engage the autothrottle.
Let's stay on.
TCI's on set.
His computer isn't in takeoff mode.
They're on now.
Okay.
Clamp. 100 knots.
At 313 kilometers per hour.
V1. Rotate.
The pilots angle the plane's nose up for liftoff. Then something else goes wrong. Just under 50 feet from the ground, the aircraft begins rolling from side to side.
Tower, lifeguard copter 102.
It rolls left and strikes a light pole. Out of control, Flight 255 slams into the ground, skids along a highway, and disintegrates when it hits an overpass.
In the midst of fierce thunderstorms, Flight 1420 is about to land at Little Rock. Low visibility and high winds make the final approach treacherous.
Wind 330 at 25.
500 feet. Plus 20.
Wind 330 at 23.
Damn, we're off course. No, I can't see it. Way off. I can't see anything. Got it? Got it! 100 feet. 50 feet. 40. 30.
20. 10.
We hit the runway real hard. We didn't slow down.
We're down. We're sliding. Oh, no.
We were still going very, very, very fast. And at that point, I thought, we're dead.
On the brakes!
It was just chaos. It was terrifying. Quite literally terrifying.
Other one! Other one, other one!
But just as they prepare to land in Los Angeles, something gives way in the tail of the plane.
Did you feel that? Yep. Okay, give me slats. This is a bitch. Is it? Yep.
The plane dives straight down from 18,000 feet. To avoid collisions, Los Angeles Control has warned the pilots of nearby planes that Alaska 261 is in difficulty. These pilots now report back to the tower.
That plane has just started to do a big, huge plunge.
Yep.
Yes, sir. He is definitely in a nose-down position, descending quite rapidly. Definitely out of control. Plane's inverted, sir. Okay. Yeah, he's inverted.
The pilots have difficulty reaching the controls. The plane is upside down, but they believe they might be able to roll the plane out of the dive.
Mayday! Push and roll! Push and roll! Kick, damn it! Push! 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 Push the blue side up!
They tried to fly the airplane even upside down. They never for a moment believed that they could not find a way to control this airplane.
I'm pushing! Okay, let's kick rudder! Left rudder! Left rudder! Can't reach it! Okay! Right rudder! Right rudder!
Plane was being knocked from side to side. It turned upside down. It was spinning. Persons were being thrown against the walls of the plane, falling out of their seats, and the cockpit voice recorder screaming unbelievable, horrible last few minutes of their lives.
Are we flying? We're flying! We're flying! Tell them what we're doing! Let me just... damn! At least upside down, we're flying! Yeah!
And it was so violently upside down that the pilots were hanging from their shoulder straps. Passengers don't have shoulder straps.
Here we go.
Floats, floats, I can't find the floats.
I got it. Just keep it at trim angle.
Right.
The pilots of 5-6 Charlie are about to attempt one of the most difficult maneuvers, ditching or landing in the middle of the heaving sea. Floats under the helicopter are meant to keep it from sinking. If they're deployed too soon before touchdown, the chopper may lose what little stability it has and topple over. Too late, and they won't inflate completely. Instead of riding the waves, the helicopter will sink below them. There's no second chance. They time it perfectly.
We're down.
Seems quite stable.
They've landed safely, but no one knows if they will stay afloat. Helicopters are top-heavy, and they fear it could keel over and sink at any moment. On the Russian plane, the pilots are getting concerned. The other plane is getting closer and closer, but they're not exactly sure whether he's on the same altitude as them.
He's going below us.
Why below?
100 meters.
Traffic.
Why?
Traffic.
TCAS, the collision avoidance computer, is warning the Russian pilots that the other plane is getting too close for comfort. At the same moment, the TCAS in the DHL cockpit detects the Russian plane.
Descend. Descend.
Peter Nielsen finally realizes what's happening.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937, descend flight level 350.
Expedite, I have crossing traffic.
Descend.
Captain Gross disengages the autopilot and starts to descend.
Climb. Climb.
TCAS is telling them to climb. The controller is telling them to descend.
It says climb. He is guiding us down.
Bravo
Descend
Tango
Charlie 2937, descend level 350, expedite descent.
Expedite descent level 350.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937.
Peter Nielsen thinks he's averted a collision by telling the Russian plane to descend. But what he doesn't know is that the DHL pilots have received a TCAS instruction telling them to descend.
Increase! Moon 600, TCAS descent!
They're trying to tell Nielsen that they have a TCAS instruction to descend, but Peter can't hear them. If both planes obeyed TCAS, there'd be no problem. But the Russians, instead of climbing, have followed the controller's orders. Now both planes are diving towards each other.
He's going below us.
Here on the left!
Increase. Climb. Increase. Climb.
Climb, it says!
Climb.
Descend!
The tail of the DHL clips the belly of the Tupolev, tearing it apart. The pilots soon lose consciousness. The DHL struggles on for another 2 minutes. It will crash 7 kilometers away.